Hi everybody, welcome to Dandelion Cottage and Watercolor Wednesday. I'm Leslie Watkins. Today I want to talk about some of the things that you could have on hand to make a watercolor note card, and that's what I'm going to do today. So the Watercolor Card Club subject this month is peonies. So I have a beautiful peony that I'm going to paint for you today. But for those who are just getting started with paper crafting, maybe somebody has never made a card before, I just wanted to show you some of the tools that you can have on hand to get started making note cards, because you don't need a lot. It's really easy to do. They come out looking absolutely beautiful, very professional, and it's really not a lot of effort on your part when you have the right tools. So first, and all of these things I will list below too, so you don't have to write anything down. You just click on the link, it'll bring you to the page with more description of each thing. But this is a trimmer. This is a paper trimmer, but it's an especially good one. And it's very precise. You have your little guide here that opens up and down like a door. It has an arm that extends, so you can cut something up to 17 inches wide. It has all your measurements, both in imperial and in metric, and you've got two little blades here. So one is actually a cutting blade, and the other one is like a little wheel, and that's a scoring blade, and that's what helps you to get those nice beautiful folds when you fold your card in half. So the first thing I would recommend would be definitely getting a really nice trimmer. And I've used a lot of different name brands of trimmers, and this is the one I really do like the best, so I recommend this very much. You want to have a bone folder. Now, bookmakers have been using bone folders for thousands of years. And oh, here comes Brack. I think he wants to say something about the bone folder. Bracky, do you recommend this? Yeah, yeah, yeah. So you see, even Bracken will tell you that the bone folder is very important. And what this is going to do, it's going to allow you to make that beautiful fold on your card without rubbing your finger across the surface of the paper. And that's good to do because you don't want the oils from your fingers getting onto the card, and it'll also help you to keep those folds laying nice and flat. I have some glue here. This is the multi-purpose liquid glue. It dries clear, it's archival, it's in a really nice little bottle here with a nozzle that helps you to get your glue exactly where you want it. Has a little bit of wiggle time, so you can get your pieces exactly where you want them, and then it sets up and it dries beautifully and very, very strong. And a little bit goes a long way. Now, you can write your own sentiments, which I absolutely encourage you to do. You can get your nice calligraphy pen out and your good inks and do a beautiful job of writing a sentiment on your card, and that's a lot of fun. But if you're not as practiced as I am not as practiced at doing calligraphy, you may want a little help. And so a set like this is a stamp set. It's called Go To Greetings, and it's wonderful. I love this set because it has all of these really great, very basic kind of sentiments, but it has a beautiful scripted hand style here. It has something a little more informal here, a little bit heavier, and then it has this very informal kind of almost handwritten but very cute style of writing as well. And I love things that say just a note or thank you, thinking of you, happy birthday, because I think that it's even more special for people to get a card in the mail when it's not a special occasion. You know, just something out of the blue, like thinking of you. Very sweet. Now, today, I have some paper set aside here that I'm going to be using. I'm going to use the Fluid 100 watercolor paper. This is what I'm going to be painting my watercolor on. And this is a 140-pound cold press watercolor paper. It's got a little bit of a tooth to it. It's nice and heavy. It'll hold up to lots of washes and painting wet and wet. We're going to use a half a sheet of this. And this comes in this very cute pack of 10 sheets ready to go. They measure 5 by 7. And so this is very handy for when you just want to have a nice, neat kit that everything fits into. This is great for traveling and all of that. I'm using this very fine, beautiful paper. It has a wonderful tactile quality to it. It's very smooth, very beautiful. This is a off-white. It's called Very Vanilla. And the envelopes, this is a medium envelope, match the paper exactly. And the paper comes in 2 different weights. It comes in the regular cardstock, and this is the thick cardstock. And so that's what I'm going to be using for my card base today. I want something that has some body to it. I want to add a colorful mat underneath my watercolor today, and I thought that this color would be especially pretty. This is called Misty Moonlight, and this is a 100% archival cardstock, so it will not cause your watercolor to discolor. It will not crack. The color is dyed through to the core, so there's no white edge. It's solid through and through. And I have a ink pad here that matches it exactly. So with this line of products, you can get cardstock, inks, ribbons, you can get refillers for your inks, you can get markers, decorative papers, all sorts of things that will match the palette exactly. They do a beautiful job of coordinating all of these colors. So the first thing I'm going to do just to get ready is I'm going to cut down my paper so I'm ready to go. I'm going to begin with my watercolor paper. This is 5 by 7. So I'm just going to cut this in half at 3.5, and all I have to do is line it up to my 3.5 mark here. There's a brace along the top that's going to hold that perfectly perpendicular. Put my arm down, move my blade, and I get a perfectly square cut every time. So it takes all the guesswork out of cutting your paper. Now, the cardstock is 8.5 by 11, and I can get 2 standard size cards from each paper. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to score it. So I'm going to score it in the center at 4.25. This time I'm careful to use my scoring blade. I'm going to turn the paper, and then I'm going to cut it at 5.5. And again, using all of these precision marks on the top there. And there I have 2 beautiful card bases ready to go with a scored line that's going to ensure that I have a beautiful fold. I can take my bone folder and just rub the crease both sides. And now I have a very smooth, no jagged edges, nice, sharp, and precise fold to my card. The bone folders are, I think they're about $7 or $8. Very small investment for getting such a beautiful result on your note cards. Now, I don't want, let me just get this out of the way here. I could take my watercolor paper and I could mount it directly onto my card base like that, and that's a really beautiful look. I love that kind of clean and simple look where it's just kind of tone on tone, and that's a great way to go. But for this painting, I want to highlight some of the cool tones that I know that I'll be using when I paint this peony. So what I want to do is I want to cut out a mat that's just a 1/4 inch smaller on all sides, or on one side, because I want to end up with an 1/8 inch reveal. So I'm just going to trim this. Instead of at 5 1/2, I'm going to cut this at 5 1/4. And then instead of 4 1/4, I'm going to cut this at 4. Okay, so that's going to give me a beautiful border that looks something like this. Now, I do want to point out that the Fluid 100 watercolor paper is going to be a little bit, let me just get this lined up. It's going to be a little bit of a different proportion, so you have a choice to make. You can either leave it looking something like this, where you have a little bit of a wider border on the bottom, or you can cut your Fluid 100 paper a little bit wider. So instead of cutting it at 3 1/2, you cut it at 3 3/4, and that's going to fill that space better. But I think what I want to do for today's project is I'm just going to trim down my mat a little bit. So right now it's at 4. I'm going to bring it down to 3 1/4. So I'm just going to take off that little sliver, and you can see you can get these beautiful, very, very precise cuts with this trimmer, which is why I like it so much. And now it's going to fit just right. And the difference in the proportional border there is going to fall now on the card base, and that's okay. That's kind of nice. In fact, if you'd like to sign your card, you could sign it in this little extra area or not. That's entirely up to you. So okay, so that's my card ready to be painted and stamped. I'm going to clear off my area here a little bit. And I've got a watercolor brush. This is a number 7, which is a nice medium size when you're painting something small like I am today. And I've got my watercolor palette right here. I have just 3 colors. I'm going to be painting with a limited palette today of just yellow, red, and blue. And I have my peony. So this is the last of the peonies from the garden. So this is a bud that's just beginning to open up. I have a couple of other buds that may or may not open, but I was very happy to go out there and find this last one so that I could share it with you today. This is a Festiva Maxima peony. It's an old-fashioned peony. It's the kind of peony that you would find in your grandmother's garden. It's been around for a long time. It has a very good vase life. It looks beautiful in the garden, and it has a wonderful fragrance. And this little bud is one of the side shoots, so it's not going to be as big as one of the main flowers would be, but it's still very, very lovely. And if you look closely, you'll see that there's a little smattering of magenta on the edges of some of the inner petals. I think you can see that. So it's just a couple of little splashes. I wish you could smell how sweet this fragrance is. It's lovely. All right, so I'm just going to set this up in front of me so I can get a good look at it. I also, by the way, this is Alchemia, which is just a nice little filler flower. It's this wonderful kind of chartreuse color, which looks good with just about everything. And I'll probably put a little bit of that in the picture as well. All right, now so that you can see this better, I'm going to zoom in. Maybe that's a little too much. There we go. All right, so there's our paper. And I'm just going to check my settings here, make sure that, oh yes, hello everybody. We've got Linda, Kelly, Teresa from Louisiana, Beverly, lots and lots of people. Hey everybody, I'm so glad to see you. Sandra, Ginger, Kelly, Carol. The country is well represented today. Thank you so much for joining me. This is going to be a really fun little picture that you can do very, very quickly and send out a lovely note card to somebody. So I'm going to begin very lightly, and I'm just kind of mixing all my colors together to get a kind of a neutral tone. And I'm keeping it a little bit on the cool side, so it's sort of a so when you mix your red, yellow, and blue together, you'll get a kind of a neutral grayish kind of color that you can then push in different directions depending on how much of any particular color you add to it. So in this case, I'm keeping it towards the blue-gray tones. And so I'm just going to take, and I'm just going to draw with my brush. So I'm going to begin by sort of getting my peony situated on the page. And I know you're not going to be able to see this very well at first because it's going to be very light, but as I paint, it will begin to emerge. I'm going to take a little splash of green to indicate where the calyx is, and it's got these wonderful kind of springy sepals. And the stem has more of a kind of a yellowish quality to it, and I'll just let that kind of fade out as it comes down away from the flower, just soften that. And while I have the yellow green on the brush, I'm going to just go ahead and add that, just a little indication of that Alchemia in the background. A little bit down here, maybe we'll put some over here as well. And the Alchemia is made up of very tiny little flowers, so I can just add some kind of little texture at the edges to indicate those little flowers as they sort of go off into space. All right, so that's my basic idea. And all I'm going to do now is just sketch some petal shapes. And this is going to be a very kind of loose, washy representation. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. I just want something cheerful and pretty that will make somebody's day a little bit brighter when they open up the card and they find this lovely flower on the inside. The peonies this year, I think, bloomed earlier than usual. We had a few very warm days, and I think that really caused them to accelerate. Now the days are just beautiful, cool days. So I'm really glad that we missed all that heat that so many of you had to endure. I don't do well in 100-degree weather, so I'm sure you were all hunkered down inside and hopefully in your craft rooms with air conditioning. Just adding a little more texture to that background. And I can use that same green to kind of define the shapes of some of these petals. I want to indicate some of that sort of flecks of magenta that are towards the center of the flower. Just adding a little more paint as I go along. I can draw the shapes of some of these petals on the edges. And we're just about done here. Just a few more strokes. And finally, I'm just going to put some accents. Also in the center of my flower. So there are some places where you can see right down into the shadows. I think my stem could be a little bit darker. Add a little more color to that. All right, so that's my background image. I'm going to just put this aside to dry for a moment while I do some stamping. Now for the stamping, I'm going to get my stamps out. my ink, and I'm just going to grab a piece of scrap paper. So in my paper pack here, I've got some scraps ready to go. Let me zoom you out a little bit so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to use the Thinking of You. Oh, maybe I'll do Just a Note. I'm going to use Just a Note. I love that. So that would be this one. When you get your stamps, they come in different styles. They might be clear stamps, which are called photopolymer, or you may have red rubber stamps. And the red rubber stamps hold up particularly well with this very fine detail work. So if you have a stamp that has a lot of fine lines, hopefully you'll get it in the red rubber because it just holds up better. And then you just remove this little backing off the back of your stamp, and that just helps it to stick to the reusable block. And you can use these hundreds and hundreds of times. And you know, in the old days, the stamps used to be mounted on wood, but that was so bulky, people would end up with a collection of stamps that just was heavy and massive and took up a lot of room. This is a great alternative to all those wooden blocks. So then what you're going to do is you're just going to, now I haven't used this stamp before, so I want to test it. Sometimes there's a little bit of a residue on the stamp, and you want to make sure that it's stamping well. So before I go to my good paper, I'm just going to stamp on this scrap paper, and it is gorgeous. And the color is beautiful. I'm going to line that up. Give it a little press, and now I have this beautiful sentiment. It's a little bit crooked though. I'm going to straighten that out. So I'm just going to turn it around, do it on the other side instead, and that's perfect. Now that I have my sentiment, I can get my trimmer back out, line that up, and because the guide here is clear, I can see right through the center here exactly where that's going to cut. Get that there we go. I love that. Maybe I'll take a little bit more off the top. Just a smidget. Perfect. Okay, so if you want to take just a tiny bit like this, you can do that with this device. It just works so well. Okay, I've got my card base, my mat, my sentiment, and my artwork. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my liquid glue. I'm just going to put a thin bead of glue around the edges. I'm just holding the tip down to the paper as if it were a ballpoint pen and just running that along. I'm hardly squeezing at all. I'm going to line that up on my mat. Okay, get that nice and centered. I can take my bone folder, give that a nice rub, burnish that cardstock so that the glue is distributed well. Okay, when I'm happy with that, I can add a little more glue to the back of the mat. Make sure my card is right side up. And then because the mat is slightly narrower than the card front, I'm just going to raise that up a little bit so that I've got a little more weight down at the bottom, and that's going to make that look very pretty. Okay, that looks nice. Gonna give that a good burnish. And I'm going to add my sentiment off to the side. Now I could just use my glue. Let me zoom you in so you can see better. I could just use my glue to glue this down, but I have something that's kind of fun. So these are called StampingDimensionals, and what they are little foam dots. Okay, so they have some sticky glue on them. What you do is you just peel one off the board. I'm going to use 3. Okay, and what they're going to do is they're going to raise my sentiment off the paper a tiny bit, which is going to create a little bit of a shadow around the sentiment, and it's going to look very pretty. I'm going to offset this. Let's see. Maybe I'll put it on this side. Put it up here. I think I kind of like it up there. We'll go with my original. I like that green. No, it's going to have to be there. And I'm going to place this so that it's slightly off the card, and it just breaks up that border a little bit. So there it is. That's how quickly and easy you can make a very pretty card with a matching envelope. Just write a little note inside, put a stamp on it, drop it off at the mailbox with your address, and whoever gets this in the mail is going to be very, very happy. So I hope you like that. If you're interested in learning more about watercolor painting, I have a card club called the Watercolor Card Club, which you are invited to join. It's a subscription club. Every month we paint a different flower or a different subject. Right now we're concentrating on flowers during the summer. And I'd love to have you. You get a card kit in the mail. There's a great Facebook group private where you can see what everybody's doing and get lots of additional video tutorials. There's a live Zoom that you can ask questions and share your work, and it's just a whole lot of fun. So please check out the Watercolor Card Club. I will put the link below. I'll also include all of the paper crafting tools and materials that I used today, so if you're interested in getting any of these things, you can do that with one-click shopping. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you enjoy your day. I hope it's as beautiful as it is here today, and I will see you next time. Stay well, stay happy, stay creative.